For a long time, the empath has been misunderstood, underestimated, and quietly exploited. You were the one who felt everything, the one who gave chances, absorbed emotional weight, and believed that kindness alone would protect you. While others played games, you tried to be genuine. While others calculated, you trusted. And for a while, it may have felt like life kept punishing you for being the way you are. But here is the truth most people don't see coming. The empath is about to make the biggest comeback of their life. This is not a motivational speech. This is a strategic awakening. Empaths possess something rare, deep, emotional intelligence, pattern recognition, and an intuitive understanding of human behavior. The problem was never your sensitivity. The problem was that you were playing a ruthless world with open hands and no armor. Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago. Virtue without strategy becomes vulnerability. And that's exactly where empaths were trapped. But something has changed. You've been through betrayal, disappointment, emotional exhaustion. You've seen what happens when you give too much to the wrong people. And instead of breaking you, those experiences sharpened you. They taught you where people lie, how they manipulate, and why power is never accidental. This comeback isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It's controlled. The empath's evolution begins when empathy stops being automatic and becomes selective, when compassion is no longer handed out freely but deployed intentionally, when emotional intelligence is paired with boundaries, silence, and strategy. That's when the balance of power shifts. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous person is not the loud tyrant but the one who understands people better than they understand themselves. And that is where the empath stands right now. If you're watching this, you're not here by accident. You've reached a phase where pain has turned into awareness, where naivety has turned into discernment, where your heart is still intact but your eyes are open. This video will walk you through how they reclaim control and how they stop being drained and start becoming untouchable. Comment guys with awareness if you feel the shift happening inside you, because the comeback doesn't start with revenge. It starts with understanding the game and choosing how, when, and if you play. Let's begin. To understand the empath's comeback, you first need to understand the hard truth. You are never weak, you were targeted. Empaths attract manipulators, narcissists, and opportunists. For one simple reason: you see people deeply, you listen, you give emotional safety. And in a world starving for validation and advantage that makes you valuable, pray. Machiavelli would call this predictable human behavior. People exploit what benefits them, not because they're evil, but because it's convenient. Think back. The people who drained you the most were often the ones who praised your kindness first. They mirrored your values, borrowed your emotional labor, leaned on your strength, and slowly crossed boundaries you didn't even realize were being violated. They didn't overpower you. They infiltrated you. Your mistake wasn't empathy. Your mistake was assuming everyone operated from the same moral framework you did. Machiavelli warned that those who live by virtue alone will be destroyed by those who do not. Empaths often believe honesty should be met with honesty, loyalty with loyalty, kari with kari. But power dynamics don't work that way. People take as much access as you allow, and when you give endlessly, they learn to take endlessly. This is where the empath's story shifts. What once felt like betrayal was actually education. You learned how people test limits. You learned how charm hides intention. You learned how silence, withdrawal, and distance reveal truth faster than confrontation ever could. Every emotional wound refined your perception. Here's the uncomfortable realization that changes everything. Manipulators fear aware empathy because once you understand patterns, you can't be played the same way twice. You start noticing inconsistencies, energy shifts, micro behaviors. You sense when someone is extracting rather than connecting. And instead of explaining yourself or trying harder, you pull back. You observe. You let people reveal who they are without interference. This is where Machiavellian strategy enters the empath's life, not as cruelty, but as self. You stop overgiving. You stop proving your worth. You stop chasing closure. And suddenly, the people who once had power over you feel unsettled because access to you was their advantage, and you quietly removed it. This is the phase where the empath stops asking, "Why do they treat me this way?" and starts asking, "What does their behavior tell me?" Comment, "I see the pattern," if this resonates. Because awareness is the first weapon and the empath is just getting started. This is the moment everything changes for the empath shift, where empathy stops being a weakness and becomes a strategic advantage. Before, your empathy was reactive. You felt others' emotions automatically. You absorbed their stress, guilt, and pain without filtering it. You explained yourself. You gave second chances. You tried to heal people who never asked to be healed. That version of empathy kept you exposed. But now, empathy evolves. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful individuals are not the most emotional or the most ruthless, but the most perceptive. And empaths, once awakened, are the most perceptive people in any room. You don't just hear words, you read tone timing, inconsistencies, and intent. You feel when something is off long before evidence appears. The difference now is choice. You no longer react emotionally to everything you sense. You observe. You allow information to come to you without revealing your inner world. You stop correcting people. You stop over-communicating. You let silence and time do the exposing. This is strategic empathy. You understand emotions, but you don't let them rule you. You can read manipulation without confronting it. You can sense betrayal without revealing suspicion. You can feel someone pulling away without chasing them. And that restraint that controls what shifts the power dynamic completely. Machiavelli warned against showing your full hand. Empaths used to reveal everything to soothe their intentions, fears, hopes, and loyalty. Now you hold that information back, not to deceive, but to protect and position yourself. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability unsettles people who rely on control. Instead of trying to be understood, you focus on understanding. Instead of proving your loyalty, you watch how others handle trust. Instead of rescuing, you evaluate, and people feel that change immediately. They can't quite explain it, but they sense you're no longer easily accessible. This is when respect begins to replace exploitation. The empath's comeback doesn't look like revenge. It looks like distance, clarity, and selectivity. You still care, but not at your own expense. You still feel, but you don't fold. You are no longer emotionally loud. You are strategically quiet. And that silence forces others to reveal their intentions without you asking a single question. Comment, my empathy is controlled if you feel this transformation happening. Because once empathy becomes strategic, the empath stops being done, starts becoming dangerous in the most intelligent way possible. The real comeback of the empath begins the moment you set boundaries and Stop explaining them. This is where most people get it wrong. They think boundaries are about confrontation, ultimatums, or emotional speeches. But Machiavelli understood something deeper. True power doesn't announce itself. It simply changes access. In the past, you felt guilty for pulling back. You worried about being misunderstood. You tried to soften your limits so others wouldn't feel rejected. That hesitation cost you. Because people don't respect boundaries they have to be convinced of. They respect boundaries that are enforced without negotiation. For the awakened empath, boundaries become silent, calm, and absolute. You stop replying immediately. You stop overcommitting. You stop making yourself endlessly available. And you don't justify it. This is deeply unsettling to people who benefited from your emotional openness. They were used to unlimited access. They were comfortable when you were predictable, accommodating, and forgiving. Boundaries disrupt that comfort, and disruption is where power shifts. Machiavelli taught that removing access is often more effective than confrontation. When you argue, you reveal emotion. When you explain, you reveal vulnerability. But when you calmly step back, people are forced to confront their own behavior without you guiding the narrative. This is where the empath becomes untouchable. Boundaries also retrain your nervous system. You stop living in constant emotional alert. You conserve energy. You become selective with who gets your time, attention, and care. And something surprising happens. The quality of your relationships improves because the people who respect your boundaries reveal themselves quickly, and the ones who don't expose their intentions just as fast. You no longer fear losing people. You understand that any relationship that requires self-betrayal to survive is already broken. Machiavelli would call this strategic detachment, the ability to walk away without drama, without threats, without needing the last word. And here's the paradox. The less you chase connection, the more it comes to you. Not because you changed who you are, but because you changed what you tolerate. Your calm becomes intimidating. Your absence becomes noticeable. Your presence becomes valuable again. Comment, I choose my access if you're stepping into this phase. Because boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. And once the empath learns to filter, the comeback becomes inevitable. This is where the empath gains an advantage few people ever recover from. Silence paired with observation. In the past, you explained too much. You clarified intentions. You tried to fix misunderstandings. You believed communication solved everything. But Machiavelli understood a darker truth. People reveal far more when you stop reacting. Silence is not withdrawal. Silence is data collection. When the empath stops filling gaps with emotion and words, others expose themselves. Their impatience, their entitlement, their manipulation, their genuine care or lack of it. You no longer need to confront, accuse, or analyze out loud. You simply watch patterns repeat, and patterns never lie. Machiavelli believed that the most dangerous position is the one where you are underestimated. Empaths who grow quiet are often mistaken as weak, detached, or unsure. That illusion works in your favor, while others assume they still have influence. You're already recalibrating your role in their life. You notice who reaches out only when they need something. You notice who respects your space and who resents it. You notice who grows uncomfortable when you stop overgiving. Silence forces truth to surface. This phase feels strange at first. You may feel the urge to speak, to explain, to restore emotional balance. But restraint is what transforms you. Every moment you choose observation over reaction, your clarity sharpens. You stop asking, "What did they mean?" You start asking, What did they do consistently? That shift alone ends confusion. Machiavelli taught that visibility should be controlled. When you speak less, your words gain weight. When you react less, your presence gains authority. People become more careful around you. They sense you're no longer emotionally predictable. Predictability is what manipulators rely on. For the empath, this is liberation. You no longer absorb emotional chaos. You no longer chase explanations. You no longer reveal your inner world to unearned audiences. You become calm, watchful, and intentional. And the people who once felt safe exploiting your openness now feel exposed by your stillness. Comment. I observe in silence if this resonates. Because when empathy is paired with silence, the empath doesn't just feel the game, they finally see the entire board. At this stage of the comeback, the empath makes a decision that quietly changes everything. Not everyone deserves access. Before, connection felt like an obligation. You believed being opened, available, and emotionally present was part of who you were. You gave people the benefit of the doubt. You let history, guilt, or potential keep doors opened longer than they should have been. But Machiavelli was clear: power is lost when access is unmanaged. Now, connection becomes selective. You stop investing in people who only show up when it's convenient. You stop maintaining relationships out of habit or nostalgia. You stop confusing emotional intensity with genuine bond. This isn't isolation, it's curation. Machiavelli understood alliances as tools, not emotional fantasies. Empaths, once awakened, understand this intuitively. You begin choosing relationships based on consistency, respect, and reciprocity, not words, promises, or emotional pull. Your circle gets smaller but stronger. You no longer chase closeness. You allow it to form naturally over time through behavior. You watch how people respond to your boundaries, your silence, your absence. Those reactions tell you everything you need to know. Some people drift away when they can no longer extract from you. Others step forward with genuine effort, respect, and presence. That's the divide. This is where the empath stops being surrounded and starts being supported. Machiavelli warned against depending on a single source of loyalty. You internalize this by diversifying emotional investment. You don't pour your entire heart into one person, one group, or one identity. You build layered connections, some close, some distant, all intentional. And here's the shift that unsettles people the most. You no longer fear being alone. Because solitude no longer feels like abandonment, it feels like control. Your energy becomes protected. Your time becomes valuable. Your presence becomes intentional. And suddenly, people sense that knowing you is a privilege, not a guarantee. Comment access is earned if you're stepping into this phase. Because when the empath chooses connection instead of chasing it, they stop being driven and start becoming central, grounded, and powerful. The comeback is no longer internal, it's visible. This is the final stage of the empath's comeback. S, the one no one sees coming. You don't return louder. You don't return aggressive. You return centered, strategic, and unreadable. This is where Machiavelli and the empath finally align. You've learned restraint. You've mastered boundaries. You've embraced silence. You've curated your circle. And now something fundamental has shifted. You no longer need to be understood to be powerful. Before, your identity was built around emotional transparency. Now, it's built around self-command. You still feel deeply, but you don't leak emotion. You still care, but you don't overextend. You still connect, but You don't attach blindly. Machiavelli taught that the most dangerous individual is the one who can appear calm while calculating, compassionate while controlled. That is the evolved empath. Not hardened, not bitter, refined. People notice the change immediately. They sense your absence of urgency. They feel your lack of need. They realize they can't predict you anymore, and unpredictability is power. Those who once dismissed you now reassess. Those who once exploited you now feel exposed. Those who once had access now feel distance. Not because you pushed them away, but because you stopped pulling them in. This comeback isn't about domination. It's about sovereignty. You no longer chase validation. You no longer explain your growth. You no longer rescue people who refuse to evolve. You move quietly. You choose carefully. You act intentionally. And here's the final truth Machiavelli would agree with. Power is sustained by discipline, not emotion. The empath who learns discipline becomes something rarer, a person who understands human nature deeply but is no longer controlled by it. You see manipulation without reacting. You feel energy shifts without panicking. You recognize opportunity without rushing. You are no longer reactive. You are positioned. This is why the comeback is inevitable. Not because the empath became ruthless, but because they became aware. Comment, I am in my comeback, if you feel this alignment. Because when empathy is paired with strategy, the empath doesn't just survive the game. They master it quietly, intelligently, and on their own terms.